Well, hello again, and welcome to another edition of the Speed Bag. Today, a little segment I like to call That Would Be Awesome, if it turns out to be true. So it looks like Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping are going to have themselves a high-stakes rematch this coming October, and this time, Bisping's UFC middleweight championship title will be on the line, so, that's already several phrases I never thought I'd say in the year 2016. Now, is this a fight between the number one middleweight in the world and the number two middleweight in the world? Probably not, no. Is it a fun, marketable fight that will be sold by weeks of public bickering beforehand? Yeah. Yeah, it is that. But what makes it even more interesting is that, according to Henderson, whether he wins or loses against Bisping in this UFC middleweight title fight, this will be his last MMA fight ever. Or, so he would have us believe. And you want to believe it, right? I mean, it's kind of a fun thing to believe. Imagine Henderson, who will be 46 years old by the time he fights Bisping, going in there, knocking Bisping out again, claiming the UFC middleweight title, putting it around his waist just long enough to snap a few photos with it, then taking it off and saying, "Here, you guys can have it back. I'm out." I mean, that's just a badass move right there. And it'd be crazy, right? I mean, imagine Henderson, who has never won a UFC title, finally getting one at the very end of his career, then just walking away from it all, creating a wild power vacuum at the top of the UFC middleweight division in the process. And here we thought all this time it was the Diaz brothers who were the agents of chaos in MMA. But, and maybe this is just me being a cynic here, it is really hard to imagine it playing out that way, isn't it? I mean, if he loses, okay, sure, I could imagine Henderson walking away there. And he has been fighting in MMA since the days when live blogs were carved into wax tablets, so you could understand if he felt like he'd had enough. But if he wins, if he becomes UFC middleweight champion, if he gets that ability to write his own ticket, even if it's just for one more fight to make that sweet, sweet UFC champion money, how could he resist that? Who among us could? Because see, it's one thing to say, hey, sure, I'll walk away. No last big payday for me. I don't even like money. When it's all hypothetical. That's not that difficult. But once you're actually in that situation, once you're there, you're at the top of the heap, and you can picture the fancy new giant trampoline you're going to buy for the backyard with your winnings, then I think it might be a lot harder to walk away. I think it would be really tough to even know how you would feel and what you would want to do in that situation until you're actually in it. And if he does find himself in that situation, 46-year-old Dan Henderson as UFC middleweight champion, and he does actually decide to go out on top and stick to his word there, honestly, that'd be a really powerful gesture. Way more powerful than sticking around for a few last sad fights could probably ever be. It'd be a guy choosing his health, the own priorities he'd laid out for himself, walking away from the money and not being lured back in. Basically the opposite of what almost every aging fighter has done in the history of fighting. Which is to say, don't be surprised if it doesn't happen. If it did, though, if it did, come on, that would be awesome.